Well, good morning. My name is Julie Stark, and I'm excited to be here to speak at the second DevOpsDays Kansas City. After I submitted the title for my talk, somebody told me that to say programming or programmer was out of vogue. So now it is Adventures in Coding, and I'm not an aspiring programmer, I'm an aspiring developer. Before we began, I just wanted to thank all the sponsors and organizers who put this together. They worked really hard, and this is a great conference. So how many people here didn't get into coding or programming in the traditional way? Me neither. I have degrees in sociology and graphic design, and I'm currently an office manager for a large medical entity. And I started having an epiphany about 5 years ago. We were getting ready for a new fiscal year, which is very stressful, and somebody decided it would also be a great time to upgrade 3 major software systems. And the biggest one they rolled out in beta form, so I bet you can imagine how that went. And I spent a whole year in a constantly pissed off state. I was horrified. These upgrades were so bad. One of them, I was hoping that the company was paying us to use it. It was just that bad. And I like to fix things. I like to make order out of chaos. So having to work with these kinds of systems just really was a thorn in my side. And that's when I realized that I wanted to be involved on the back end of development. So I pretty much said, oh, I want to work in computers. But what does that mean? And I just kind of put that aside for the time being. But by that point, I'd been working for the same company for 10 years. I'd been doing the same thing for 6 years. I'd pretty much gone as far as I could go with this job. And I was ready for new challenges. And then I met my boyfriend, who was a Linux systems administrator. And he helped me narrow it down and said, well, maybe you want to try developing. And he suggested Python. Python is a very good beginner program to learn. It is succinct. It is open source, so you don't have to pay any money to learn how to use it. And the Python community is very welcoming. So I started out learning from a website called Computer Science Circles, and it was very math-based. So I didn't feel like I was learning how to program. I was trying to remember how to solve for X and Y, and that just wasn't working. Then I got involved where I met the Python KC meetup group, went to one of their meetings, and the leader of that group suggested that I try a book called Python Crash Course by Eric Mathis. And in his book, it's all about pizza toppings and ice cream flavors, which I could totally relate to. And it's set up so the first half of the book, you learn the skills to code in Python, and in the second half of the book, you have projects. Now, of course, this book is available online, but I'm a book person, so I got the book. And the first thing I did was try to install a text editor called Genie on my laptop based on the directions in the book. And it didn't go anything like it was supposed to. And I had no idea why, but I did a very mature thing. I threw the book across the room and I said some special words. And I have to tell you that the book has high quality binding because it held together. So I picked it up and I took it to work the next day and I tried to install the text editor on my desktop, and it worked perfectly. So then I learned 2 important lessons right off the bat. Number 1 is that you should walk away before you get so frustrated that you can't think anymore. And not to say I've mastered that, but I'm getting better at it. And the second thing is you just need to expect glitches. I mean, there's always different computer configurations, different software versions, and we're humans, so if we write the instructions, there's a chance that they're not going to be right. I'm not good at asking for help. I'm stubborn, I'm afraid of looking stupid, and I thought that I wasn't a good developer if I couldn't figure out how to solve every problem in the book by myself with no help from anybody else. And that worked for a little while, and then I got to a chapter where I'd been on the same problem for 3 weeks. And the low point was Easter Sunday 2016. We had an early Easter that year. It was a beautiful spring day, and I'm sitting in my dining room looking out the window at how pretty it is outside, going, what am I doing? And that's when I decided to surrender and offer it up for help. So I submitted my problem to the Python Slack channel, and they actually had a lot of fun with it. The problem I was working with involved deli sandwiches and telling people that people that were trying to order pastrami sandwiches that we were out of pastrami and then offering them other options. And one of the guys said he almost didn't help because it involved removing pastrami, and to him that was unethical. And somebody else thought my list was a little boring. Maybe it's because I'm from Iowa, I'm not very creative with my food. And he thought I needed a Cubano sandwich. But the general consensus was that the program I was trying to solve really wasn't set up well, that it wasn't really teaching what it was supposed to be teaching. So here I'd been beating myself up for days and weeks because I couldn't solve the problem, and maybe it wasn't all my fault. I got to another point in the book where I was, the author would show problem examples, and I would copy them all down just so I could get in the practice of coding. So I copied this one out of the book, and I tried to run it, and I got an error message. And of course I thought, well, it must be me. And so I went over it. I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. I deleted it. I started over. I got the same error message. And so then I looked up the error message online and tried to figure out what the heck the problem was, and went back through and realized that we're working on a class here, and we define the battery size for an electric car as 60 at the top. But down at the bottom, we're asking the problem to print a message, one range if the battery size is 70, and another range if the battery size is 85. But the battery size is 60, so this is never going to work. So when I figured that out and solved it, I just felt like a rock star. I was like, you know, maybe I can do this. And so I sent an email to the author, because I didn't want anybody else to go through this frustration that I had, and looked up online about a month later and realized that he had put that in the notes as far as errors in the book. So I felt really good about accomplishing that. In early 2016, I learned about a Django Girls workshop that Kansas City Women in Technology was going to put on. And Django Girls is an international organization that gives free one-day workshops for women, teaching them how to build a web framework with Django, which uses Python. And I'm an introvert, so I'm like, a full-day workshop sounds like pure hell to me. And then at the next Python meetup group, the leader of the group showed up in a t-shirt that said, "I code like a girl," which I thought was really funny because he's not a girl. And my boyfriend, who is an extrovert, said, "Why don't you give this some serious consideration?" So I applied, and I went very quickly from, meh, I'm an introvert, it's not for me, to being really excited about it. And it was the application process that hooked me, because I realized that it was about breaking down barriers for women. And I grew up in a patriarchal family where women really aren't considered as important as men, and I realized I wanted to break down barriers for myself and all other women. And waiting to hear back to see if I'd been accepted for the workshop was very hard. But the day that I got the good news, I was so happy. I felt like I'd gotten into a sorority based not on good looks or social status, but on my willingness to learn and push myself past any barriers that I saw. And the first thing I did was buy a new laptop. So I leaned over to my boyfriend and I said the words every male geek wants to hear. "Honey, let's go shopping at Micro Center tonight." And then I went to the workshop, and I'd never worked in a virtual environment before. I'd never tried to toggle between 4 different windows at once, and I hate clutter. So we got to the point where we learned about the run server, and I turned it on, and I did some things, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to get rid of some clutter on the desktop, so I closed my run server and put it away, and then I tried to go to the website to see my progress, and the website said unavailable, and I thought, well, there's a lot of people here at the workshop. Maybe we're all trying to get on at once. I'm just going to wait a few minutes. And I did, and I tried again, and of course that didn't work because the run server wasn't going. And I had to ask for help from the mentor. He was very patient, and I think he only had to explain to me 3 more times that day that the run server needed to be on all the time. But the really cool thing was, at the start of the day, it felt like a very clumsy process, toggling between all these windows and working on this over here and then working on something else over here. But by the end of the day, I felt like I'd really gotten into a rhythm and it was starting to make sense. It was also at this workshop that I was asked if I wanted to be on the organizational team of the Python KC meetup group. And I was so excited to have that opportunity, and I said yes. So that's been something I've been involved with, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I came back to the Django Girls workshop this year as a coach, which was also very rewarding to be able to do that and to share some of my knowledge and pass it on to others. I got to the point in my Python book where I had learned all the skills and I was ready to start the projects, and I felt like I had arrived. And the project I decided to do first was building a web framework with Django, because I thought, hey, I've done this before. This is going to be easy. Yeah, so I'd only done it once, and once just isn't enough. So I got to the point in the project where it said to create a new directory for your project, switch to that directory in a terminal, and create a virtual environment. And I was like, what? So there was a little bit of learning there. And of course, the project didn't go as quickly or as easily as I thought, but I learned so many things along the way. For instance, I learned that Linux commands do not work in a Windows environment. I learned that I should never code before coffee or after wine. I learned when you're typing in commands, you don't type in the $sign. That doesn't help at all. And I learned that you shouldn't always upgrade pip when the computer tells you to. Because I did that, and then the directions and what was happening on my laptop were not the same, and I ended up starting over the project 5 times. So I got really good at the first part. But it was really rewarding. Now, there are a lot of weird words and phrases that we use in the developing world or in the programming world. They mean something different in the real world, or at least in my mind. For instance, one of the Python KC organizational team members in his bio said that he was a Lisper and a capoeirista. So I didn't know if that Lisp was a computer program or if he was part of a group that got together to Lisp for fun or what he was talking about. And capoeira, did he mean the Brazilian martial art, or was that also some computer program that I didn't know about? The first time I got an out-of-socket error, I wasn't happy, but it made me think of a tooth on the loose. You can get information in a tarball or a wheel or a kernel, and a wheel makes me think of a wheel of cheese. And you can even have this thing called kernel panic. So the little hand-drawn thing you see with the exclamation points around it, that's my attempt at drawing a kernel panicking. When I heard about porcelain, I thought about a porcelain doll. There's a thing called celery, and you can even fork things. There's a constant source of amusement for me. So I got to a point last year where I was kind of doing a tailspin. I had finished my Python book. I had shared my adventures in programming up to that point with my Python meetup group. I didn't know where to go next. I didn't know if I wanted to learn a new language, if I wanted to learn SQL, if I wanted to blog, if I wanted to learn Linux. And then I got to a point early this year when I was just really unhappy with everything I was doing in my life, because I'd set the bar so high. I wasn't doing good enough with bass guitar playing, with my house projects, with my weight loss or lack thereof, with the computer programming. And then I had a bicycle accident involving some steel plates in March, and I dislocated and broke my left shoulder. And I should tell you that I'm left-handed. So suddenly things changed real quickly. And I was in the ER. I was wearing a brand new exercise top and a brand new Lululemon sports bra, and they had to cut my top off. And I was bummed. And then they were going to cut off my sports bra. And I'm like, now, wait a minute. This is a Lululemon sports bra. You can't. I mean, is there any way for you to fix me around this? And they said yes. So I was able to negotiate to save the sports bra. And they said they were going to reduce me. And that made me really concerned, because unless they were talking about my thighs, I didn't want them to reduce me. I wanted them to fix me. But they said they had to do a closed reduction. So they manually put the shoulder back in place. And they were going to give me this drug called ketamine so that I wouldn't be aware of what was going on. Ketamine is a mild hallucinogen and an amnesiac, but I'd never had a drug like this. And I said to the doctor, are you sure this drug's going to work? And he just looked at me and laughed. So they gave me the ketamine, and I have to say that was the most fun part of the whole experience. And then I woke up, and they sent me home. And so I got home, and I pretty much, all I could do at first was deal with pain management and rest and some disbelief and panic. And I had time to think about why I'd been so unhappy up to that point and what I could do going forward. And I realized through the injury that I had to listen to my body. I had to be more kind to myself. When my body needed rest, I had to go rest so that I could heal. I also had to learn to ask for help. I don't like asking for help, but there were a lot of things all of a sudden I couldn't do. And it was so rewarding to be able to ask for help and to get help, and people were happy to help me. And I don't really want to go through this ever again, but I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to rethink some of the things I'd been doing and learn how to be better going forward. So because I'm trying to change careers, I've had a couple of job interviews, and the first one happened 8 months after I started learning Python, and I thought, wow, is it going to be this easy? No, of course not. To begin with, I'd never gone to a technical interview. I didn't know how to dress. I know how to dress for a business interview, so I asked the guys in my Python meetup group, and they're guys, so they said a button down and khakis is what I should wear. I was like, well, that's not really my thing. But I showed up for the interview. I still overdressed. I think I ended up looking like my mother, not like a hip developer. And I showed up for the interview 10 minutes early, which didn't really impress anybody. So I don't know, it didn't start well, and it was not a good interview. And then the second interview I had was 6 months later, and it was a phone interview. And I'd never done a phone interview before. And I had an app on my phone called Mr. Number. And what Mr. Number does is if somebody calls you and Mr. Number thinks it's spam, it disconnects and blocks the number. So yeah, the interviewer called me and Mr. Number said, oh, that's spam. Click. And then I spent about 5 minutes scrabbling furiously trying to fix the problem. And so by the time we got reconnected, I was all flustered, and that didn't go well either. But both of those interviews happened before the injury. And it dawned on me after the injury that if I wanted to do well in the interviews, I was going to have to practice. I was going to have to build skills. I was going to have to have a polished personal commercial. And then I had a job fair come up, and I signed up for it, and I prepared for it. And I did well. And I got a phone interview, and I prepared for it, and I did well. And they seemed really interested. And then I learned the salary was $14,000 less than I currently make. And it wasn't a true tech job, it was just heading in the right direction. So I opted not to pursue it. But I still felt really good about how that turned out because I prepared for it and it went well and it was a success. I've had another interview with a company that does paired programming. They do nothing with Python, they're all JavaScript. And they assured me during the technical test that I didn't have to know JavaScript, I just had to tell the programmer what to do. But when you don't know the language, you really can't tell them how to do it. So that interview didn't go as well as I'd wanted either, but I still felt good about being asked and having the practice, and I feel like I've learned everything from every interview I've had, and I'm just going to keep plugging away, and at some point it's all going to fit into place. But the greatest thing is I'm happier again. I've learned some important lessons and skills, and I'm putting them into practice, and I'm being more patient with myself and focusing on the things I have accomplished and not the things I haven't. And I'm learning to ask for help. And I have to say that programming is one of the most complicated, challenging, frustrating things I have ever tried to do, but it's also been one of the most rewarding. I've gone out of my comfort zone so many times, and I've done things that I never thought possible. So I'm very thankful that I got into this, and very thankful to have the opportunity to share it with others. And I just want to thank you all for listening today. Here are some of the resources that I mentioned during my talk, and here's my contact information. And if you have any questions, I'll be available after the talk. Thank you so much.